Thank you for the presentation.
네, 윤 대표님 발표 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
AI 시대 다양성 이슈와 실천 사례, 본인의 직접적인
So
실천
he shared
사례를
with us
잘
the issues
말씀해 주셨습니다.
and issues of AI ethics and what he has actually experienced in the field.
이제 세
We will
분의
discuss more during the discussion session. Now we listen to the presentations of three speakers, and I'd like to introduce the two panelists for discussion. Currently, the first panelist is Professor Kim Hyo-eun from Hanbat University, who is teaching AI ethics. And the second panelist is from Intel Korea, Mr. Lee Jae-ryung, the Executive Director of Intel Korea.
자, 지금부터는 세 분의
And the discussion will be
두분 토론자들의 토론 시간을 갖도록
done
하겠습니다.
first by the two panelists. First of all, I would like to ask Professor Kim to make comments, and then Mrs. Lee Jae-ryung. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kim Hyo-eun. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important conference. I listened to the three presentations, and thank you for that. Actually, the presentations were about systematic, and they contained practical examples of AI ethics, and it was very meaningful for me to listen to those presentations. I have question first to Professor Toby Wash. There are many AI ethics issues, but there are nothing new in the AI ethics. That was very impressive to me. But there are some issues related to autonomy. So it was very impressive that I learned about a new perspective from the presentation by Professor Toby. And for the presentation by Mr. Chun Chang-bae, he proposed a lot of visions for AI ethics. So far, many guidelines on AI ethics have been announced at home and abroad. Now we're preparing standardization of those guidelines, and we are working on them with companies. And what about regulations for companies? The companies or businesses are also coming up with alternatives on the regulations. And also, it was interesting that he proposed that the pin set or tweezer regulation should be a regulation, a passive regulation. And I want to ask whether the tweezer regulation can be a proper alternative to the regulations on AI industries. And also, he mentioned education for elementary school, middle school, and high school students. Now I am teaching AI ethics as an official course. At first, I taught students AI ethics from AI engineering perspectives, but then they just accepted it as just a theory. So AI is something that is done through software, so we can use software. AI ethics is different from engineering ethics. When we create data or algorithm, AI technology is included in that process. I have recently used a machine learning platform for kids. So I had a project where students participated in the experience of inputting, entering data and variables to the platform and see what results the data shows. So in the process, they can find some bias. So if they see any bias from the data platform, they can make some corrections. So while proceeding with the project, I thought that AI ethics education is education on ethics, and at the same time, it could be education on software. So I thought that we can combine AI ethics education with software education. That project was done for college students, and we can get some ideas for elementary school or middle school students. This is all for my comments.
Thank you, Professor Kim. So let's get answers for her questions. Professor Toby Walsh, can you answer her first?
Sure. I think there's no magic bullet here to deal with the issues that AI raises. We may not need too much in the way of new ethical frameworks, aside from what I already discussed around autonomy. But how we then actually ensure that we improve the well-being of everyone, consistent with those ethical frameworks, is going to require lots of different things. It's going to require education. It's going to require soft regulation, norms, international standards, and also hard regulation. It's going to require us always to update new laws as well. So it's worth realizing that there are many different aspects to this problem and many different solutions. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 월시 교수님 연결되셨으니까
Thank you.
한 가지 더 질문드리고 싶어요.
As we have Professor Walsh online with us, I have some questions to you. AI will replace many human jobs, people say, but on the other hand, it will create more new jobs than it is replacing, meaning that it will create more jobs in net terms. But if that's the case, from the existing job point of view, maybe there is not much to prepare. But for the future new jobs that we have not imagined so far, well, how can we prepare ourselves? Can you answer that question? That not right now, but you can give some thoughts and answer a little bit later.
두 번째
And we have Mr. 전창배 to answer the question.
First of all,
윤리 교육, 인공지능 윤리 교육을
she said that
교수님께서 이제 새로운 방식으로 진행을 하신다는 말씀을 듣고
she is proceeding with AI ethics education in a new way, and I thought her way of educating students on AI ethics was very innovative. Then how are we going to educate students on AI ethics? That methodology is also important, and I agree with Professor Wash.
따지고 보면 인간의 윤리로
AI ethics is boiled down to the human ethics because it is people who make and use AI. So we need to create the righteous AI ethics. And if we use AI in line with the AI ethics, then there will be no problem. So first, we need to educate students on human ethics when we teach them AI ethics. When the internet was created, and since the internet was created, we have faced a lot of problems like privacy infringement and hacking. And some people search for information about how to make a bomb through the internet, and they use the bomb to commit terrorist attacks. And some students can also misuse the information they search for the internet. So we need to start the ethics education for students from very early age. And I think it is very important to teach students on having the right personalities, on having integrity. And she asked me a question about the TWISR regulation. From companies' perspective,
가이드라인대로 만들어라면 굉장히 규제로 느낍니다. 이제
if companies are told you have to create AI solution according to a certain guideline, then the companies feel that they are under a certain unjustifiable control and regulation. These days, businesses are saying that they feel burdened when they heard the announcement from the government that there will be some laws and regulations to be put on the AI businesses. So if we put excessive regulations on AI technology development, then Korean companies will find it hard to advance the AI solutions and technologies at a rapid pace. So we need to put selective regulation. For example, we need to put further regulation on protecting privacy and preventing some issues like infringing on the security of the nation. And recently, I read some article about the bias of AI technology, and businesses really do not want to be controlled by the government regulations, but they find it difficult to make a self-regulation guidelines. So that's why an organization like ours is needed. We can cooperate with the government and industries to create the proper guidelines on AI ethics.
Thank you for your answer. So, as you mentioned during your comment, well, you said during your presentation that the concept of AI ethics, well, you mentioned the concept of AI ethics during your presentation. So, later, if we have time, can you just re-summarize that again? Not now, but later. And let's go on to our second panelist. We have Executive Director Lee Se-kyung. So please proceed. Nice to meet you. So as you said, I really enjoyed the three presentations. So AI ethics, well, it is not just one subject, but something that encompasses all the fields of AI that is something that is very critical. I have a question to Professor Toby Walsh. So you have mentioned about the future society brought on by AI and various policies or principles of different companies and businesses. Maybe the key here is the children, how to prepare our children for that new future. But who should be responsible for doing that? And how can we assist these people who are taking the lead in preparing our future generation? That is a question to Professor Walsh. And to Mr. Chun Chang-bae, my question is like, this AI is creating utopia and dystopia at the same time. And AI ethics education, well, that starts from the right education. So, well, we know that already. Everybody is talking about the human-oriented AI, but AI itself is very difficult. So people think that AI is such a sophisticated technology, something that is beyond the realm of the ordinary people. But we need to understand that AI is not just for the technical-minded people, but for everybody, even the elementary school students and elderlies. We will all enjoy the benefits of AI. But this term sounds great, but we don't know where we should be starting. So, Mr. Chan, you have this association working on this area. So, if you can tell us where that education that is discerning the utopia and dystopia should be starting, please answer that. And Mr. Yoon, I have known your company from the beginning. I was very touched by that high goal and the aspiration of your company, and you have got great funding. So you're helping many people with autism, not just in Korea, but in overseas. And it is not just about people with autism doing something, but doing something meaningful. So people with autism and people with eye vision disabilities, well, we know that we should be inclusive to those people, but solutions so far were very weak. But your company is doing these things very aggressively and also getting economic gains as well. So that's so nice to hear. My question to you is that we should be scaling up such a nice model. So not just TestWorks, but many socially responsible companies and other ordinary companies should be benchmarking it. And how would you be assisting them doing that? So it's not something that you can do alone, but you need a lot of support. So it is whether it's about education or trying to do a diversity, have diversity. Well, we say that we need diversity and we need to be inclusive, but if we have such an inclusive and inducive environment naturally, that is just including these vulnerable people, what should be the role of the government and the business and the civil society? That's my question to you. So thank you for your question and comments.
그럼 우선
So let's
교수님의 그 질문
first
답변 순서는
begin with Professor Toby Walsh.
자, 교수님.
Professor?
Thank, thank you. I think it's wonderful that so many of the speakers, so many of the questions have focused around education, especially education of the young, because that is going to be absolutely critical to manage the transformation that we're going through here. And the question, the really important question that's been asked, well, what are the right skills that we should be equipping, especially our young children with, so that they're prepared to work in the second half of the 21st century? And it's not just about preparing them for work, it's about preparing people to be good citizens, preparing to be able to live fruitful, meaningful lives. It's worth remembering that the purpose of education is not just to prepare people to work, it's to prepare people to be happy, productive citizens. So what are those skills? Well, they're all the things that machines can't do. Machines don't have limited emotional intelligence, limited social intelligence, limited creativity, limited adaptability. So they're actually quite old-fashioned things. I don't actually argue that everyone should be taught how to program. There's certainly plentiful jobs today in programming, but the dirty secret is that machine learning is all about getting computers to program themselves. And so we will actually perhaps need fewer and fewer people to do the programming moving forwards. It's worth all of us understanding about computation, computational thinking, so that it's not magic. The world around us is something that we can understand and we can be active participants and we can imagine different futures. But the secret actually is that machines are going to be programming themselves increasingly, and we're going to be doing the things that machines can't do, the things that require emotional intelligence, the things that require social intelligence, the things that creativity and adaptability, all those things that make us truly human, and things actually, ironically, that we used to teach with things like the humanities, but quite old-fashioned things that we used to teach, and perhaps need to be re-emphasized in our curricula. Thank you very much.
네, 월시 교수님 감사합니다. 그 아주
Thank you, Professor.
깊이 인상 깊은 말씀이셨습니다. 사실
It was very impressive.
윤리를 지금 얘기하고 있지만
We're talking about AI ethics.
논의들이 많고 실제
We're discussing a lot on education on AI ethics, but we have been overlooking
걱정도 있습니다.
the importance
월시 교수님께서
of what you have just mentioned. The thinking capability is very important. And secondly, I'd like to ask Mr. Chun to answer the question.
지금 이제 서울시 교육청 자문관으로 일을 하고
I am an advisor to the Seoul City Education Office.
전국 교육청들이 다 이제
Education offices across the country are trying to enhance students' capability on AI. Seoul City Education Office designated 4 high schools as the high schools specialized in the education on AI. And going on, the number of high schools specializing in AI will increase to 10 high schools. And how do we have to teach students AI ethics? Of course, AI ethics must be included in their curriculum.
제일 들어가면 제일 좋겠죠. 그래서
It will be good if they have subject named AI ethics. So actually, at high schools, AI ethics will be included in the curriculum as an independent subject, and we are now making the preparation to publish the AI ethics subjects. But there are some things we cannot learn only from books. So the skills and knowledge of liberal arts are also very important, which requires a different way of teaching students. And we can also provide students with some vocational education, which may include the AI ethics as well. And AI ethics
과목을
education curriculum is being created and taught at
김효은 교수님
universities as well. And Professor Kim opened the AI ethics course at college, and she's teaching college students AI ethics. And I hope such AI ethics curriculum will be expanded across other universities as well. The US and Australia
필수 과목으로 가르치고 있거든요.
are teaching students on AI ethics as a mandatory course.
나라에서도
So
중요한데 사실 인공지능
I think we also need to do that in Korea. We're focusing too much on AI technology, so we have been not focusing on AI ethics enough. So we need to emphasize the importance of AI ethics. Thank you.
So now we'll hear from President Yoon Suk-won. So in the end, the question was how we can create the ecosystem. That is how I understood your question. So as you said, we alone can't do it. And I think we are just a pioneer in this area. And we are trying to create the reference and best practice in this area.
사실 이거를 하기 위해서 저희 혼자
And
해보진 않았습니다.
we were not alone in doing this actually. We have had, well, at first we tried to do everything alone, education, everything we tried to do alone. But recently what we did was,
교육 같은 경우
for example, for education,
NGO 단체라든지
we have NGOs or public education institutes or other social companies specializing in education, and we are trying to create a pipeline together with them. And that is
즉 이제
like
어떻게 하면 더
we are trying to find ways to attract more talents into the ecosystem. So in this front end, we are trying to rely and depend on these experts in various fields. And there are companies in Korea, like local companies in Korea and also in Australia and Europe and the US. There are these companies who are trying to hire these vulnerable people. And for these companies, we have created a platform to share our know-hows and skills. And by using the platform, they can participate in some projects together with us. And we are trying to find a mutually beneficial model in the local economy to help everybody involved. And what is the role of the government in this regard? Well, the government's role would be
생태계를 좀 연결해 주는
to,
초기에는 좀 이걸 인큐베이팅
well,
많이 해야 되는
there should be more incubating role by the government. Of course, large companies like Intel should play some role in that regard, of course.
이런 모델이 자꾸 확산
And this model should expand and have more industrial partnership. And of course, in the end, industries will be gaining economic benefits. It's not just about solving social problems, but AI companies will be
본인들의
getting what they need and get help in their business. So we will be creating those good cases and create the ecosystem together with all the parties involved.
관심이 필요한 상황.
And I think we need more attention in these regards. And you mentioned about ethics. You didn't ask a question, but just to comment, I think that before we talk about AI ethics education, we first need to do the education on our existing biases. For example, as we are hiring disabled people in our company, I could really feel the discrimination and biases in our society. I could see all the hardships that these people are facing in our society.
AI라는 것이 결국
So learning AI, well, AI learns things based on what we currently do, based on human behavior. So if we are to have ethics, our way of thinking should be
제대로 검토할
well reviewed.
혹시라도
so that our biases and discriminations are not infused into AI's machine learning. So that is something I think should be done first before we talk about the AI ethics. It's like a prerequisite that we need. And well, there were suspicions from the society saying, if you hire disabled people, what kind of job can you do? Can you really properly do the business? Recently, I was doing some IR pitching with the overseas funding, and I was asked a lot, how are you trying to maintain the cost if you are hiring disabled people? People were thinking that if you hire disabled people, your HR cost will be expensive. But if you look at the turnover rate, disabled people have lower turnover rate than the ordinary people. So if people have high turnover, then we need to spend money for retraining the new human resources. So you need to really think about the discrimination we have as human beings. So actually you said something that I need to think about on my own as well. And I could feel that we have the Korea Foundation for science and advancement of science and creativity. And I think that CEO Yoon can be like a leader in creating the ethics of the human being for the creation of AI ethics. I thought that we will have more time, but actually we are running out of time.
쉽지가 않네요. 그래서 오늘 토론하신 두 분한테 조금
So
말씀하실 기회를 드리고 싶은데
I'd like to give more chances to the discussants to have more comments.
굉장히 중요할 것 같아요.
Then who are we going to teach AI ethics? First, developers, engineers, designers, and companies. In other words, those who make AI. Secondly, users of AI. And fundamentally, AI itself is also the subject of AI ethics education. Then for the three objects, for the three targets of AI ethics, what is your view on the way we need to conduct the AI ethics education? After listening to the comments from the panelists, I will make my closing comments. So thank you for a very good question.
Well, developers and users, what was the last thing? Well, the local autonomous government. Well, I want to say from the user's perspective. Well, users are the current users and the future users. So in that regard, it's like everybody in Korea, and also in terms of children, the future generation, they could either be like the creators and the users, and providing the right education to the users would be very important. And if I can ask myself the question I had given to Professor Walsh, well, I still think the 500,000 teachers of Korea are the key. When we do our programs in Korea, like the AI program for the future generation, if I cite the example of Songcheon-gu of Incheon, well, they got our training, and within 2 years, they could create a program that can mimic the sound of the president. So it was like the active learning and the deep fake that students could actually understand. What we planned was to upload it onto the internet so that people can try it. But we found that there might be abuse cases. It was so we didn't do that. We didn't upload it onto the internet. Just we introduced it as a good case to the public. And what the students also did was the code of conduct. So these children have set 5 codes of conduct in creating and deploying the AI for themselves. So code of conduct is not just for companies or governments. Children should be able to create their own code of conduct. So for the future users and the current users, when they learn AI, they should learn about ethics at the same time so that they will know how ethics is reflected in all the parts of this AI use cycle, starting from the data extraction, data acquisition, data processing, and everything. They can ask themselves whether this is done properly and who should be doing it. It should be the teachers who are with the children all the time. So what I want to ask is each and every one of the teachers should be the coach or transformers of AI ethic so that like 500,000 or 1 million students of Korea will learn it properly and become the right AI creators and AI users of the future. Thank you. Thank you for your comment, Ms. Kim.
Today, I thought that we could share questions and answers, but I feel that we are creating a new value through the session, and I agree with what you have just said. When I created AI ethics course, I reviewed the issues of AI ethics, and I thought that issues of AI are in the end the issues of people because it is people who input and use the data of AI. So when we think about the AI ethics education, we need to first focus on people. So we shouldn't just hold AI technology itself accountable for all issues that are happening in our society. We need to focus on people first, and we need to change our society and culture so that we can prevent problems of AI ethics. AI is, in some sense, the reflect what human beings are. So we need to reflect on ourselves. We need to have some reflections. And as you said, we need to conduct AI ethics education not in terms of theory, not just in terms of theory, but also in terms of providing hands-on experience for students to understand what AI ethics are.
Thank you for your comment. So actually, I thought that we will have a lot of time left, and I have prepared two closing comments, but I will just end up with just one comment. So during the presentation by Mr. Chun Chang-bae, I got the hint. Digital innovation should come with ethical awareness, and if we don't do that, then we will have very sad situation where we go back into the era of brutality. So that is what the Pope said in the past, and I think that today's conference would serve as a meaningful opportunity for us to look back into the true meaning of AI and AI ethics. Thank you all for your participation.